Well, Washington's young people, both in school or on their way, hopefully, to graduation, need to pay attention to this race because this office was created to benefit them, and in two ways. The first way is it manages the state trust lands, which is both timber lands, it's agricultural lands, and about half of the lands on the timber side have been set aside to preserve, but another half of those lands are supposed to be being managed. And what that means is there are harvests taking place, there's healthy silviculture work being done, it's protecting the forest. But when those harvests take place and those logs are sold, that money is then supposed to come back into local schools. So school districts all across the state should be seeing money from that to help with capital projects, building schools. So I don't know if any of you young people are in schools right now where you look around and you think, more could be done to make this building a better place for us to learn. Well, that's what this is supposed to be doing, supporting you in that effort. And I think the second way that this really impacts young people is in the overall health of Washington State. We're an abundant state with natural resources, but if we don't actively support those resources and manage them, they will fall into disrepair. And what does that look like? Well, right now, we're seeing more forest fires happen in Washington State than we've seen in a long time. In fact, on the west side of Washington, we're seeing more fires than we've seen even on the east side, which is where they typically happen because it's a drier climate. But what we're seeing is the forests are not in the shape they should be in to make them resilient for fire purposes. I'd like to get in there and make sure that we're harvesting in the areas that we should be, not in the set-aside areas, and having those tax receipts, that money go to support local schools, police, and fire. But then the second benefit of that is it makes the forests more fire resilient. It makes them healthier. Healthy forests are where species live. And if you look in some of the forests that have been completely set aside and untouched, there's so much fuel on the forest floor. There's dead and dying trees. You won't see a lot of species. You won't see as many elk or deer or types of birds because they can't thrive in that environment. But if you go to a healthy forest where it's been selectively managed and harvested in certain areas, you'll see an abundant and diverse array of species. You'll see a better and more healthy ecosystem. And I know that's important to young people. It's important to all of us, but I know especially it's important to young people here in Washington State. So in those two ways, they really should pay attention to what is happening, what the candidates are saying in this office, because it will directly impact money for schools and the health of our forests.
I think the next Commissioner of Public Lands has an opportunity or a responsibility, I would say, to protect more of our special places. And in particular, I'm interested in protecting our older forests that I like to call almost old growth forests. We don't harvest old growth forests in this state, but there's a small group of forests that are on their way to becoming old growth, and people refer to them as mature legacy forests. They're naturally regenerated, meaning they're not tree farms. They're structurally diverse. You walk into them, you can see the beauty. They store the most carbon. They have the most biodiversity, plant and animal life. And they make up only about 3% of our state-owned forest lands, but they have an outsized impact on our climate. As day one, as your next lands commissioner, I'm going to sign a mature forest policy that ends the destruction of our mature legacy forests. And the cool thing is we can do this and still nurture rural economies, support good jobs, and fund public services. How? By acquiring replacement timberlands using existing state funding streams with names like Natural Climate Solutions Program or the Trust Land Transfer Program. Most of our timberlands in the state are actually private timberlands, and sometimes those timber companies sell off those lands for development. That's a great chance for the state to purchase those and bring them into our trust holdings to allow us to preserve these special places. A second issue that I think is critical in this race is the opportunity we have to use our public lands to help meet our clean energy goals in this state. We have a law that says that by 2045, utilities in Washington State have to provide all of their energy from clean energy sources, and we can use our public lands to help deploy utility-scale solar energy projects, wind energy projects, and others. But this involves working collaboratively with tribal governments, with environmental community and local governments up front early in the process. And then I'm proposing that if we find suitable land that works for everyone, and it's not in public ownership, that we consider buying it for the State Department of Natural Resources and creating a new clean energy trust where we lease those lands to clean energy developers, and the money we earn goes back into those rural communities to help low-income folks with energy assistance and to invest in rural economic development. Both of these two proposals will help us meet our responsibility to address the climate crisis we're facing.